Welcome to Wisdom from the Aerial View, the podcast for those who wish to crush their anxiety and find meaning and purpose in their lives. How are you today, Mark Klein?
I'm very good. How are you today, Miss Borden?
Very good, too. I want to begin today's podcast. I want to read something to you. And it was written by Marcus Aurelius, who was, of course, a Roman emperor from 161 to 180, and a Stoic philosopher. He said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." So today, let's talk about Stoicism. And that's a fascinating concept. It's a fascinating philosophy. And you and I and your wife have been talking about it for a while. And it's a philosophy of resilience. There's no question about that. And there's so many things about it that remind me of the aerial view. And so I think it's a great starting point to talk about Stoicism and why you in particular said to me, let's talk about Stoicism. So go ahead. Tell me why you did. Let's start that conversation.
Well, you actually just nailed it because I don't remember why I was looking at some of this, but it's so aerial view in so many ways. Which just goes to show you that there are not any new ideas under the sun. And I've told anybody who's willing to listen many, many times that I don't have a single idea that's unique or never been thought of by another human being on this planet. There are very few new ideas, but they keep popping up again repetitively in different generations and different eras, and which tells you that they have legs, right? They have power because if the same ideas keep recurring, they tell you that there's probably something to them. And the reason I wanted to talk about Stoicism was because I was reading a book that actually my wife recommended. It's called The Pursuit of Happiness. It's about the concept of the pursuit of happiness in the Constitution. And what he does is he looks at the founding fathers and talks about what influenced them. Because the founding fathers didn't just get together one day over a cup of coffee and go, "Hey, let's create something new. How about a new government? What sounds good to you?" No, these people were extremely learned. Franklin and Jefferson and Adams, and the list goes on, right? These people were really smart. They studied the classics. They studied Greek and Roman literature and history. And they weighed, and even the philosophers like John Locke and Hume, the Enlightenment philosophers, they looked at all these things and studied them and learned them and took them very seriously in terms of forms of government also to figure out what would work, what might not work, understanding how people work. So this was very thoughtful stuff. This wasn't a bunch of cowboys thinking, "Hey, let's just have some fun and build something new." These were really thoughtful, smart, educated people. The first thing I thought was, when I was reading this, is that, oh my God, I can't believe we don't teach this to every single high school kid in the country again and again and again. I mean, I can't believe we have left this out. This is why our education system is a disaster. This is why our society is somewhat of a disaster. Yeah. So the pursuit of happiness, if you stop somebody on the street, these roving reporters stop these 20-somethings on the street and ask them, can how many people are in the Senate? And they go, 6, right? They don't know anything, right? It's very sad, obviously, that there are so many people like that. But if you ask them, in the Declaration of Independence, there's a line about the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I would say, what do you think they meant by the pursuit of happiness? I'm going to guess they'd say, doing what you want, having a good time, having a fun life. Nobody's telling me what to do, how to live. Completely wrong. That's completely wrong. It's like how meanings of words change over time. This is the meaning of a phrase that has changed dramatically over the last 250 years. The pursuit of happiness to them had nothing to do with fun and partying. It had to do with living a good life through cultivating virtue and inner strength, inner resilience. So if you were to say to them, what does it mean to pursue happiness? It means to pursue a virtuous life. That's what it meant. You tell somebody like that in their 20s now, and they go, or even in their 30s or 40s, who knows? They'd say, no, that's not pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is doing what I want to do, man. Have a good time, live my life.
Right.
No.
Let me stop. The whole thing about Stoicism is this whole notion of virtue. And I think maybe the issue here, Mark, and let's dig a little bit deeper. What is virtue? What is it? What does it mean? And how, in fact, does that help us pursue happiness? Talk about virtue.
Well, there are virtues, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
these guys had virtues. I think there's a list I had here somewhere. I don't know if I can find it, but it's like, some of them you'd say are kind of silly, like not silly, but you wouldn't take them as seriously, like frugality, right?
Yes,
But
yes.
it would be, or, prudence, or, patience, courage. These are things that make up a virtuous life. And then, Aristotle talked about all these things. So, but really, the number one thing is to live a virtuous life is to live a committed life where you care about others, you do good. We
Yes,
had a conversation with Bruce Levinson a couple of weeks ago about doing good, where
yes.
you do good, right? You do good for others, you do good for your society, you do good for your community. These are all part of living a virtuous life: being courageous, being brave, being honorable. Like I said, frugality for some of them, controlling your
Fortitude,
emotions.
fortitude, right. Mm-hmm.
Fortitude, controlling your emotions, big one, very
Yes,
big one. And in
yes.
fact, one of the things I liked, oh, here I go. I found this. Uh, 4 core virtues of Stoicism. Um,
Wisdom,
wisdom, you know these, right?
justice,
Yes.
courage,
Yes.
temperance.
Temperance. That's
Those
exactly right.
moderation.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So these are the core virtues, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Notice justice. What is justice? It's acting in the benefit for the greater good, right?
Yeah.
Justice doesn't mean to them, um, you know, uh, you stole my property and therefore I want the law to
Right.
adjudicate this
I'm going to
properly.
sue you. Right. No, it's
Right.
fairness, isn't it? It's fairness.
It's doing what's good for your community, right?
Yeah.
To seeing that what's best for your community. Now, we have different opinions about what is the right thing for a community. We can differ on that, right?
Yes.
We have this big immigration thing going on now. So we can differ about what the right way to approach it is. But if the bottom line is to let's do the most good for the most people, that's it. So the point about pursuit of happiness is that it's very Stoic in its underpinnings. It comes from Stoic philosophy that to pursue happiness is to have this journey towards virtue, towards gaining virtue. It is not about having a good time.
Right.
Nowhere do these guys ever talk. If you read this book, or you read Jefferson and Adams, they never talk about having a good time. Never, right? It is not about that. The pursuit is so much higher, on a higher plane. Why? Why did they feel this way? They were very influenced by the Stoics, particularly, and other philosophers, that this is a purpose of human life, that there is, what do we talk about in this? What was the introduction to our podcast?
Meaning and purpose.
Define meaning and purpose, right?
Yes.
These guys were all about meaning and purpose, right?
Yeah.
So for them, they argued a lot about how do you get the public to live a virtuous life. They worried about that a lot. All of them worried about that. Adams, for instance, John Adams was he was very skeptical about the public's ability to do the right thing. You needed a strong government, a central government to do it. Others disagreed that the central government could get too powerful and so on. So they had all these, very high end discussions about what the proper government to create was, but they all shared the same idea. Live a virtuous life, create a society full of virtuous people. That's what the aim is. That is the pursuit of happiness. Now, we have gone off the rails in our society about that. And I think the reason is because, and this struck me, we don't teach any of this. I mean, honestly, even you and I, 155 years ago, didn't get a lot of this in high school, right?
No, of course not. That's exactly right.
We didn't call it civics. We called it social studies.
Social studies. Right.
So we did talk about certain, how governments work and organizing, but we didn't talk about this kind of stuff.
Well, because we didn't talk about a philosophical notion about things. It was purely textbook. There was nothing seriously thoughtful about it. It was just sort of rote, just learning how many members of how many people are senators, how many are Congress. It wasn't about the philosophical underpinnings of what it all means. And I think that's the issue about happiness. That's why I think kids nowadays, and we did, when we talk about happiness, it means having fun because there's no philosophical underpinnings, it seems to me.
100% agree. This is why, you mentioned earlier how the aerial view kind of melds very well with this. It is, if you want to talk about purpose, right? If you just live a life, just in the sense of what we of the 21st century think of happiness, which is fun, right? Fun, having plenty, having things,
Yes.
activities, whatever, then that's a very superficial way to look at it. From the aerial view, of course, we're always focused on purpose, because that's where the meaning comes from, and all the things we've talked about ad nauseum about, time and the jukebox of time and all these things we've talked about repeatedly. They're all focused much more on purpose, because we realize that to get joy out of life, to get meaning out of life, it's more than just what's fun today. I'm not against fun. I love fun, right? We talk about humor. I love laughing. I mean, there's few things better than laughing. So fun is great. Entertainment is great. Enjoying yourself is great with your friends and family. It's fantastic. Nobody's saying don't do that. But what these guys are saying, what the Stoics were saying, is that's not enough. That won't get the job done. That won't lead you to a fulfilling and meaningful life. Only virtue will get you there. So, that's why I'm so glad we decided to talk about this, because now it is, I look at this as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking, boy, this is you and I have talked about curricula and creating curricula for, middle school and high school students. And boy, this should be right at the beginning, right? Obviously, it's hard to get people to read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. That's 2,000 years old, but the messages are there. You can put them in modern day language, right? You don't need to read.
Done. And it ought to be done. There's no question about it. Yeah.
Right.
The other thing I was thinking about when I'm looking at Stoicism, I'm thinking that in relation to the area review. One of the things that they talk about greatly about the Stoics was about self-governance versus being controlled by the world. That you are in control, that you are in charge, which is exactly what you've been saying in your writings. And your writings really evolved from Stoicism when you think about it.
I read about the Stoics many, many, many years ago. And of course, as we well know, things fall in and out of our heads.
Yes.
And you don't remember where things necessarily came from, right? So I remember studying philosophy in college, of all things. Believe it or not, even though I was pre-med, I did take philosophy courses, which I loved, right? Actually, my favorite courses in college were not, physics and chemistry and math. We did them in biology, but they were the other things. And so, when I went back and read, I went, oh yeah, now I remember this stuff, and then of course, obviously it gets inculcated into your personality and you forget where it came from, right? So that's why I said, I've never claimed that I have any new ideas. I'll tell you something interesting though. So all the Stoic ideas and a lot of philosophical ideas were people's opinions and what they've derived from their own lives and from what they've read before, they've seen before, previous societies and cultures. But one thing that the aerial view provides now that wasn't available before is the science behind it. So, for instance, Marcus Aurelius, who you mentioned, he talks about impermanence, how things are transient and, fleeting. He mentions, of course, everybody's going to die. We talked about that, I think, last episode. Yes. Everything you have is going to vanish. We talked about that. Fame is going to go away, right? But when you understand the jukebox of time, meaning Einstein, and you understand that time exists contemporaneously, and you see the world in its entirety and all moments existing forever, it gives an underpinning, a fundamental physical underpinning to these philosophies. And to me, that was, maybe everybody doesn't get excited as I do about this stuff, but that's why that's how it's true. Right? When you put that together with the physics, the science behind it, then all of a sudden philosophy has a different, it has an additional value to it. So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking about all these things, and that, the fact that we talked about how when you're young, you're foolish, and when you're older, you're smarter, and it's completely backwards, and why all these things, why our world must be experiential, why each of us must go through this, why we can't just read from Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, I think it was his name, right? One of these Stoics. I like that name, Epictetus, right? Or Seneca or Cicero. And, why isn't it enough to just read these things? Why do you have to go? Why is life experiential? Why do you have to do this? And again, we've talked about all this because we're preparing. It's not enough to read. We each have to go through this to experience it ourselves, to prepare for whatever it is that comes next, which we don't know what that is. But when you put it all together, it's such a dramatic story. It's so compelling. And which is why, if we want to have a society like the society that the founding fathers envisioned for our country, you have to get back to this underpinning philosophy. You must address it. You must teach it to our young people. Otherwise, they're just running around randomly with no purpose. Just have a good time. What's the difference? Pursuit of happiness says it in the Declaration of Independence. I can do what I want. No, that's not what they meant. They meant you must lead a virtuous life.
Right. Yeah, I get back to Cicero. Cicero actually, in his philosophy, he had a philosophy which was how to learn how to die. And he talked about how we have command over ourselves. I mean, very fascinating view of things, no question about it. And part of the Cicero philosophy was to manage yourself, not the outside world, only manage yourself. Everything is an opportunity, including suffering. And that's an interesting concept. And he said, choose virtue over comfort. So he talked a great deal about suffering as an opportunity, which is an interesting concept when one thinks about that suffering is an opportunity. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts about that? Cicero's feeling about that?
Well, I'm sure he's right. I'll tell you why. Nobody chooses suffering.
Yeah.
But one of the things we've talked about a lot, and as we've gone on now for well over a year, I think we're into our 60s in terms of episodes. There are these recurring themes, and one of them that I've tried to discuss is that all moments are equivalent. There are no special moments. All moments count, and we need to embrace every moment. In fact, I think one of the maybe it was Epictetus. One of these guys talked about embracing every moment, right? In his own language, right? You have to embrace every moment. So the point here is that that when you realize that all moments are equal, then the bad ones, the sad ones, the unhappy ones are just as important, or maybe even more important in some ways. I think I would say equally important to the good ones. Why? Because they're all part of this story. If we are here to evolve, if we are here, as we and I have talked about, to make this evolution from selfish to selfless, from inward focus to outward focus, to complete our mission, right? To reach that so that we're prepared for whatever comes next. Then every moment's equivalent. Every moment counts. Then you have to appreciate the moments of suffering. I have another story for you. So you know the story, but I'll share it. Because, when things happen to me that are not so pleasant, after the initial shock, I often do what?
Laugh.
I laugh, right? Because it's so ridiculous. So
it's for your own happiness, yes.
We were on vacation and recently, and I had developed this sudden weird pain in one of my knees, which has never had a problem before. I never had an injury, right? And, it became very debilitating very quickly, so that it really limited what I could do. I didn't stop doing it, but every step was difficult, painful. And I didn't enjoy it one single bit. But I did find myself on more than one occasion laughing about it, because it was so life. It was so part of life. It was so part of the story. You can't get away from it. So what do? Do you pitch a fit, get mad, scream, cry, put your head in the pillow, lock yourself in the bathroom? You could do all those things. People do. Or you just say, wow, this is an interesting part of my story. I didn't see this coming, right? That's kind of interesting. Look what's on page 447. Wow, right? This comes out of nowhere. When you're in Europe, what a terrible time for this to happen, right? But when you're in the aerial view and you can become the disinterested observer. And I recommend people doing this every day at some point in the day. Become the disinterested observer. Get yourself out of yourself. Get yourself out of the street view. Just look at it from afar. Look at it as that disinterested observer. You go, whoa, that's kind of interesting. Because remember, all moments are equivalent. A lot of people aren't going to take my word for this. And, I'll never try and sell anybody anything, but it is true. All moments in that jukebox of time are equivalent. There's no way to differentiate them, right? So they're all part of your story. So you have to embrace it. So getting back to your question about suffering. So was I suffering? A bit. Yes, I was.
A lot.
Did I like it? No.
What was the opportunity that you took from the suffering? So if you look at what the Stoics said, if you look at the suffering is an opportunity for something else. So tell me, what was it the opportunity
It's an opportunity for reflection, to understand what your place is in this world. You're here for a limited time, right? That's it. Stuff is going to happen. Every moment's equivalent. Make something of it. Do something with it. Don't lament it. I was talking to somebody the other day about grief. So grief, you've heard many people say this in this current culture, that I haven't gotten over my grief yet. I haven't dealt with my grief yet. I'm still grieving over something that happened
Yes.
6 months ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. Okay. And I'm never going to tell anybody what to do. I'm not interested in telling people what to do. I'm interested in helping people as much as I can, but I'm not interested in forcing them to behave in a manner that I think appropriate. But I watch this and I go, oh, you know, in my head, I'm going, you're getting this wrong. No, grief. No. Grief quickly. Grief should be as quick and short as possible. You can remember, you can embrace, you can love that person forever or whatever, but don't grieve. Don't grieve because the clock is ticking. Grief isn't going to help. It's not going to make you any better. It's not going to move you along your course of your own mission. You have a mission. You're here for a purpose. You don't have the latitude to waste it. You know, you have been given a gift. You know, if you believe in God, then God gave you the gift. If you don't believe in God, well, you got the gift from somewhere else. I don't know where it is, but it's a life, right? Mm-hmm. Do something with it. Remember, all those records of your life, those moments are always going to be playing forever. You want good stuff on them. Don't waste your time on grief. It doesn't mean you forget or you become callous. You just move forward. You just continue to move forward. You can't change what's happened. It was always going to happen. That was the story. It was always going to. Remember, all time exists forever. The future as well. So don't lament it. You know, recognize it, embrace it for a short time, and then move. Don't forget, but just move forward. Focus on the next part of your life. Focus on the next day. What are you going to do the next day? What impact are you going to have on the world? Right? How are you going to improve yourself to move yourself along your mission? Grief. My God. Don't, you know, I know this is such an unpopular concept. Some people are going to listen to this and go, well, then you don't know what grief is if you feel that way. No, I know what grief is. I know what it's like. Have I had the worst? No, of course not. You know, there's plenty of people who have much, much more grief than me, but it won't change anything for me, right? I recognize what it is. Nothing is permanent. It's so interesting when Marcus Aurelius talks about impermanence. When I read that, I went, I get the idea, but be careful because there is permanence and impermanence, meaning that every moment of your life lives forever. It doesn't ever go away. It's alive and playing. It's permanent. You know, just as this moment is permanent forever. It's not only in the record, it is happening, right? It is happening forever. So that's why we never really lose anybody. That's why nobody ever really dies. People listen to me when I say that and they go, this guy is a lunatic. No, it's true. You know, give a call to Albert Einstein, right? He'll tell you all moments exist contemporaneously forever. Okay. That means you can't die if you're on those records during your life. You're not on the records. The right way to think of death is that you're not on the records after your last record that you're on, but the records you were on from the moment of your birth, the moment of your death, your lifespan, those things are going on forever. Well, you can't die if you're still alive on those. So death has a different concept. It just means you're done with the records that you're on this earth. You're not on anymore, but you're still very much all the ones you were on during the moments of your life. Okay. So these are so important. And what the Stoics were saying was, yes, your life is a journey. The journey is what counts. The journey towards virtue. The outcome doesn't really matter. They never talk about outcomes. They talk about process and journey, that you're on this mission to become more virtuous, the things we've already talked about. There was a couple of quotes out here that I thought were just fantastic. Understood in these terms, happiness is always something to be pursued rather than obtained. This comes from this book. Quote, the mere search for higher happiness, Cicero wrote, not merely its actual attainment, is a prize beyond all human wealth or honor or physical pleasure. Let me read that again. The mere search for higher happiness. What does he mean? He means virtue. Virtue. Mm-hmm. Not merely its actual attainment is a prize beyond all human wealth or honor or physical pleasure. It's the effort. It's the journey that counts, right? So, the Stoics are very big about don't try and control things you can't control. Right. We talk about this a lot. This is the Viktor Frankl rule, right? Exactly. What are you in charge of? How you react to things. Another thing, I forget which one of the Stoics said this, but that events, I might have been Marcus Aurelius. I might be getting this wrong because I'm not a philosophy major, but that events have no meaning. Remember how we've talked about this, Enid, that events have no meaning? It's our interpretation of events that count. How we see it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a very Stoic philosophy also. Yes. I forget which one, but one of them said it. So this is the point. This is the point that we're on this mission. They all agree we're on this mission to virtue, that it's the journey towards virtue that counts. And that virtue involves assisting other people, doing good for the world, for your community. These are all part of it. We have lost, that is nowhere in our education system at the moment. You can't find that. Good luck finding that in anywhere. I mean, I shouldn't be too harsh. I mean, I'm sure it exists in some places, but it is not in the mainstream of thought, right? We do not have a society whose thought is, I'm going to try and live a virtuous life.
Well, it should be, when you think about it, if it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of virtue, we might think twice. In that may be a better way to school our children instead of this word. And again, we get to this notion of semantics. We talk about that all the time. It's what these words conjure in our minds, what they mean, what are the meanings of these words. So if it was life, liberty, and the pursuit of virtue, perhaps we'd be on a better course.
I agree with you. Yes. But we can do that. We don't have to change the wording in the Declaration of Independence. We can just explain to
only Trump can do that. Yeah.
We just need to explain to people as young as possible, middle school, high school, so on, and continually that the pursuit of happiness is the pursuit of a virtuous life. Correct. It is not the pursuit of, I want to do anything I want and you can't tell me what to do, which is where we are, right?
We are, but we've done that. I mean, we've done that to ourselves. We've done that to our children. And now let's make this day, whatever day we're doing this, that's the day that things change. Because if we don't, we just continue along this rocky road, and I'm not sure it's going to get us very far. We're not going to be virtuous. We're not going to have a virtuous society if all we think about is our own happiness.
100%. And, look at our politics, right? That, they are, imagine if we substituted, and I'll give you an example. So I was listening to John Fetterman. We've talked about John Fetterman, senator from Pennsylvania. And this guy had a very near-death experience. He hovered over death. Now, I've never met John Fetterman, but I've watched him before his stroke, and I watched him after his stroke. And this is a guy who clearly is different. And it's not that he lost blood supply to his brain and he's not thinking clearly. He's seen the world a different way. He does believe in sense of virtue. He does focus on this. He doesn't care. I think he could care less now if he gets reelected. I don't think he cares one whiff. Once you've had this kind of experience like that, and that's what we need. We need politicians. I don't want them to all have to go through a near-death experience, certainly, but I would like to see them have a revelation of sort that it's not about me. It's not about how do I get reelected? How do I contain my power? How do I grow my power? How do I go from being a mayor to a congressperson to a senator to a governor to a president, right? Which is what they're focused on, instead of what these Stoics and what our founding fathers were focused on, and living a virtuous life. Now, I'm not saying the founding fathers didn't have their problems. People are going to go, yeah, well, Jefferson owned slaves and he didn't give them up, and George Washington owned slaves. And I get it. These were not perfect people by any stretch, as my wife often says.
And nobody is. Right.
My wife often says, if we're going to only look for perfect people, we're going to run out of people. To do things, right? So, but still, they did focus on this idea of a virtuous life, of a meaningful life, a journey towards virtue. And so that's what's missing in our politics. Well, it's missing in our society. No wonder it's missing in our politics. So, this is something we should, and, I don't know, actually, it's a big project. Let's put it that way. Yeah, but it's something that after reading this book and having this discussion with you, it seems to me that this should be priority number one.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And look at this, we're running out of time. I'll end just my little piece here by reading something. Again, we started with Marcus Aurelius. Let me end with it. He said, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." Good ending, isn't it?
Yeah, that guy was one. And what's interesting about Marcus Aurelius? His book Meditations, that was like his personal journal. Right?
Yes, it was. Right.
He wasn't writing this to publish and,
That's right.
Right. And one other thing I think before we leave, I forget who it was. It might have been Epictetus. One of these, I like saying Epictetus, obviously.
I know you do.
But one of these guys talked about having a list every day and I know because Ben Franklin used to do this. How did I do every day?
Yeah.
And I think I've told you at the end of every day for many, many years, I would come home from work and I'd say, how did I do today? Every day I would say, how did I do today? How many people did I help? Some days I'd say, oh, okay, you did an okay job today. Some days I'd say, oh, you didn't do enough today, right? now that I'm not seeing patients, I don't have as much of an opportunity, but I still like to think about it. And when I read that these guys were doing the same things, it just struck me that, the story repeats, right? These are common. There's something inside each of us. This need, we understand this need to move forward, to progress, to do the right thing. So, we have a lot to owe the Stoics, and I think it's time to bring them back to mainstream education in our country.
I totally agree. Let's do that. And if there are teachers out there who are listening, consider it. And if not, choose a new profession. Anyway, I thank you. The other reason that I think that our founding fathers didn't think about happiness the same way, because when you had to wear those wool suits that they wore throughout the summer, they weren't happy. That wasn't happiness. But anyway, I thank you for the time. I hope everybody listens and starts thinking about the Stoicism, reading some of the books. There's some wonderful podcasts. There's a man by the name of Ryan Holiday who does a terrific podcast and writes wonderful books about the Stoics and Stoicism. And I think it's something that we all ought to think about. And if not, then read Wisdom from the Aerial View, because that'll be a good first step into the world of Stoicism. With that, I thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Enid. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I think we're good. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.
Peace.